What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where every single week I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content that I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking Table for Three, the latest edition that aired after Raw this past week on the network, entitled Good Enemies, Better Friends, with JBL, Bruce Prichard, and Eric Bischoff. Not the most newsworthy episode they've ever done, but a very enjoyable episode at that. So they talk about, to start off, JBL and Bischoff doing Prichard's podcast, when he's going to return the favor. They talk about Prichard having lost a lot of weight since the last time they saw each other. Bischoff talks about how Vince McMahon wanted you to think that he was the underdog during the Monday Night Wars. So pretty much this entire episode, just to preface this, is that the entire episode kind of discusses the Monday Night Wars, Bischoff representing WCW, Prichard representing WWE, obviously JBL representing WWE as well. So it's kind of cool to get both sides of the coin here from WCW as well as WWE and their respective point of views. And they do kind of get a little heated at some points, but overall they kind of are cordial in conversating about the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars and whatnot. So anyway, Bischoff talks about he never really wanted to put WWE out of business. He was simply determined and adamant about putting forth the best product possible. And putting WWE out of business was what almost happened in the mid-90s, but that was never really his goal. And they talked about how 1993 was Bischoff's most profitable year, turning a company that was down in the shitter in WCW and making it the most profitable company in the matter of a year or two. And JBL brings this up and he's like, dude, why aren't you on Wall Street? Why aren't you doing more with money? Why aren't you doing more on this side of things and kind of branching outside of wrestling? Because obviously if you could turn a $1 million corporation around in the matter of a year, why aren't you branching outside of wrestling? And he talks about how Bischoff does. He talks about how wrestling is in its own little box, and people always think any success that you have within wrestling, within the realm of wrestling, can't be applied elsewhere. But he talks about how that could not be any farther from the truth. No, he wrote his own book as well. Controversy Creates Cash. Talking about his rise to fame and success many years ago during the Monday Night Wars and his, and everything that he did to turn around that company WCW in the mid '90s, early '90s. But that being said, he makes a great point that people kind of look at wrestling like, if any success you have there, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be successful outside of wrestling, which again could not be any further from the truth. So anyway, Prichard talks about McMahon's hiring freeze in the mid-90s, how he didn't really want to hire anyone else. They had their own good core group of guys. JBL brings up how 1995, now this was an interesting quote, and if you really listen to what he says, it's going to sound ridiculous when I bring it up here, but he said 1995 had the greatest roster of all time. And 1995 was one of their worst years. But if you look who was on the roster at that point, he makes a good point. They had Triple H. I think Kane was under contract, I'm pretty sure, because I know they were doing the whole Isaac Yankem DDS shit. They had Kane, Triple H, The Undertaker, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and so many other people, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, while they were at their peak, and so many other stars. So again, the product was utter shit. But their roster was amazing for the stars they had at that point and the stars they would groom to be big stars in the years that followed. It kind of reminds me a little bit of 2018. I think their roster right now might be the greatest they've ever had, but they're not really treating these people like stars. The product is not the greatest, at least on the Monday Night Raw side. So it kind of reminds me of 95 in that sense, after he kind of laid it out like this. I mean, the wrestling was never really the greatest in 95 like it is today, but the product overall was just ice cold. And despite having a great roster, and that seems to be kind of the case today as well. So anyway, Bischoff talks about how WWE had no real counter for us in WCW because they had no creativity, he said that you had no creativity, saying that to Prichard and JBL. They had no creativity with any of their angles or any of their storylines or any real way to fire back other than just doing fucking Nacho Man, all this other dumb stuff in the mid-90s. And they talk about, when was the real turning point for WCW? Because obviously the company went down the tubes at some point. Bischoff says that WCW took a turn for the worse when Vince Russo took over creative by the end. And that was when WWE, he just ripped WCW off. He said he ripped WCW off. I don't remember what they're talking about. Did WWE rip WCW off, or was it Vince Russo? I wrote that down here. I forgot what he was talking about, but he pretty much pinpoints that point when Vince Russo took over creative in WCW as the beginning of the end for that company. Prichard says that WCW stole WWE's talent. And then Bischoff says it's just because we were paying them more than WWE was paying them. You look at Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, that was the only real reason why they came over. It wasn't really creative or anything along those lines. It was just because they'd be making way more money over in WCW. That was the only real reason why they stole their talent. And in some cases, they were using their talent better than WWE was. Not in many cases, but in some cases. So they discuss finances of the WWE and WCW and stuff like that. JBL says that the turning point for WWE was the Montreal Screwjob. Maybe not like overnight, but in terms of creating realism with their angles, kind of ushering in the Attitude Era, which was kind of already in full effect by that point, I believe, or a little bit after that. I forgot when that promo from Vince McMahon aired, talking about how all this other stuff is passé, like good versus evil is passé. I think that was in December, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot when it was exactly. It was soon after this. And Mr. McMahon, of course, was created out of the Montreal Screwjob, which is what they talk about here. Maybe not overnight, but the promo, the one that's weird, the thing that's weird here that Prichard and JBL bring up, which I find fascinating, that Vince McMahon, which doesn't surprise me in retrospect, when he went out there and did that promo, that interview with Jim Ross saying that Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart, he thought that would be a babyface promo. He thought he would be cheered. But in fact, they fucking hated his guts. And they just ran with it and they turned him into an authority figure. But Vince McMahon was not Mr. McMahon overnight coming out of the Montreal Screwjob. I think a lot of people forget that. He was not the Mr. McMahon character until like after WrestleMania. After Stone Cold Steve Austin became WWE Champion and stunned Vince McMahon on Raw the next night. And that was when he became the evil authority figure. So, again, Vince wanted to be the one to face Bret Hart in Montreal. Be the one in the, kind of stand up for himself after Bret went berserk in Montreal after he was screwed over, and rightfully so. The fact that he went berserk, not the fact that he was screwed over. I'm not saying that was justified. But Vince wanted to be the one to get in the face of Bret and take the beating for the other wrestlers, that it was his fault. And he thought, again, he would be the babyface in all of this. But obviously he wasn't. He didn't want to go out into the audience anymore after he started to get booed in late 97. But at some point they just started to run with it because he didn't want to be a bad guy. He didn't want to be a bad guy. But again, the boos got so loud and it got so real, they had to run with it. And he became the best bad guy this company has ever seen. Prichard called it magic. JBL talked about fans saying that Vince is losing it, yet the guy's still a genius. JBL also talks about how Vince never sleeps, that he is, quote unquote, one of the most unique individuals he's ever met. Vince even told Prichard one day, Bruce Prichard here was talking about how Vince said back when they were working together in the late 90s, early 2000s, that he told Prichard that one day there would be a WWE Network. But of course, Prichard isn't thinking a fucking streaming service. He's thinking a cable network, and everyone was laughing at Vince, but he knew that the company was going to go public, and obviously it did at one point. And he knew that at one point they were going to have a network. It was just more a matter of when than if, and obviously it took a long time, but they finally launched it in 2014. It wasn't what they originally envisioned, but I would argue that it's better. I think everyone thought that it'd be a cable network, not even dating back to the late 90s, early 2000s, but like dating back to even a few years ago when they initially announced it back in like 2011. People were saying, oh, what channel is it going to be on? Do I have to pay for it? Blah, blah, blah. What they have now is 10 times better than anything anyone could have ever hoped for. Prichard talks about being fired twice, once by Vince, once by Stephanie. Prichard apparently hired JBL. This is where they kind of get into their personal relationships here, which is cool. It's, again, not newsworthy, but it's cool. JBL had a beer with Bischoff one night at the bar, and apparently it was called like a secret meeting by the boys. And because of that, because the boys thought that JBL was having a beer with Bischoff at the bar, say that 5 times fast, WWE offered him double the money in a 5-year contract to just not jump ship to WCW at that point. That's how in bad of a shape WWE was at that point, and how they really wanted to keep all their stars. And Bradshaw was far from a star at that point, obviously, but they were so scared about the secret meeting and all this other stuff that they offered him double the money and gave him a 5-year contract, which is crazy. Bischoff talked about his transition over to WWE starting in 2002, calling it awkward, but he was friends instantly with JBL and Prichard right from the get-go. Prichard was apparently Bischoff's producer for a lot of his segments, and all three came from the bottom of the business and worked their way up, which is why they get along together so well. Prichard and JBL apparently are very open and honest with each other, and he always knew him just as John. He was always really the person that he is now, and Prichard wanted JBL just to be himself as a character. And he really went to bat, Prichard talks about here, that he really went to bat for his 2004 persona that became John Bradshaw Layfield. Apparently Vince loved the Layfield name, and that was what spun off the JBL character that we would know to come to love and largely hate starting in 2004 that kicked off his long reign as WWE Champion over on SmackDown. Prichard wanted to work with Bischoff because of his success, knowing that all the success that he came from WCW, that he wanted to work with him starting in WWE, and obviously they bonded very well as a result of that. Prichard shares a story about Bischoff, and they discuss their bond together, being friends. They talk about how all three of these guys trust each other, JBL, Prichard, and Bischoff. And they also talk about the work that went into everything that they did to become the success stories that they are today. And again, it's not the most newsworthy episode, but I thought it was a very enjoyable, very not emotional, but like heartfelt, real episodes of Table for Three, which is great. Three guys that are just very good friends, talking about their times in the business, coming up in the business, working together, and kind of coinciding with the Monday Night Wars, as well as the ruthless aggression era of the start of the JBL character, Bischoff coming in, Prichard's time with the company. So it's great. It's great to see Prichard on the WWE Network. Obviously his podcast has been airing on there for a while, which I have not reviewed on here just because the podcasts are so long, but they are great though. They are very, very entertaining. They're well worth checking out. They just ended season 1. Hopefully they are renewed for season 2 at some point, because season 1 I thought was great. I really like the format. Some of their actual podcasts, something to wrestle with, not something else to wrestle with, are just so fucking long I don't have the time to listen to them. But the hour-long shows in the network I think are great. But anyway, so yeah, great to see Prichard here. Bischoff, I think, was on one of these before, if I'm not mistaken. But always great to see Bischoff, and of course JBL as well. This might have been filmed over WrestleMania weekend, but I also have a feeling this might have been filmed over like Raw 25 too, because I think all three guys were there. But anyway, I thought this was a very good episode, and well worth checking out on the WWE Network. It might be the longest Table for Three to date. It's 27 minutes in length, but as always, never really feels that long. Very entertaining. Well worth the 27 minutes I watched it for. So anyway, guys, thank you for checking out WWE Network and Chill. I appreciate your time and listening to the review, liking the video, sharing the video, commenting on the video, and of course, subscribing to the channel. I appreciate it. We will be back, I believe, with my review of Total Bellas on Sunday. So stay tuned, or on Monday. The new episode airs on Sunday. We got 2 episodes left. One this Sunday, one next Sunday. So I know Impact is having their Slammiversary show on Sunday night. I am leaving for New York on Monday, so I should have my review up on Monday. If not, it'll be up on Tuesday or Wednesday, hopefully. But anyway, guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.